So hi, everybody. My name is Anita Bell, and I am with the University of Arizona Center for Innovation. We are here for our new series that we're planning to do monthly called Sippin on SBIR Success. Hopefully, all of you have already heard about SBIR, STTR program. We're not going too much into detail of what that is, but of course, we will have a Q&A section. So if you're not quite sure what it is, you can ask away on that way. And we will be featuring one successful entrepreneur that his company has received that. So just, of course, since I have this audience here, a little bit about the University of Arizona Center for Innovation. We are an incubator, actually a network of incubator systems here in Southern Arizona. And our goal is to support startup companies based on science and or technology through a whole array of resources. We are connected to the University of Arizona. The UA Tech Park is where we have one of our locations, and we are very well connected within the greater Tucson and beyond ecosystem of entrepreneurs and entrepreneur supporters. So if you need to know anything or want anything, we're one of the portals and three ways to get you connected elsewhere. What we do is we support our startup companies with business development. We have that based on our roadmap that we developed. There's 27 what we call buckets of things and topics that we believe every entrepreneur should know and be well versed in to build their company. So we utilize this as a tool to track progress, can be used as a tool for the companies to talk amongst themselves, and especially with their mentors, coaches, and advisory team. We have several locations. So one of them is the big one up in the corner. That's the tech park out at Reeder Road in I-10. So we have about 20,000 square feet of space there, including offices and laboratories. Getting kind of full these days, but it is a resource that's available. And especially if ever you're working on SBIRs, oftentimes you need to not do that in your garage at home. So you may need a location. So we have that. We have a location up in Oro Valley and building out one at the bridges over on Kino and I-10. And this is where my slide gets stuck, so I have to manually advance it. Of course, today we're talking about SBIR, and why are we doing this? We've been doing SBIR outreach for the last 10 plus years, kind of doing a lot statewide on that. We've hosted the SBIR Roadshow, which is organized by the Small Business Administration. And we had, I think it was about 20 of the program managers from the SBIR program here. People could meet with them. They talked about the programs, and we've done a lot of work in that, as I mentioned, over the 15 years. So we're pretty well versed in our team about what that means. And for clarification, I know I've talked about this acronym already. SBIR stands for Small Business Innovation Research Grant, and it is a federal funded program. STTR is the technology transfer program. And again, we're not getting probably into too many details of that, but just know that we know a thing or two about that. And our goal with this is to also inform you and help you receive some of this funding. So with that, I'm just going to introduce Emil. He is a co-founder, founder, CEO, bottle washer, and everything at Signet. Very successful entrepreneur, doing many things. But today we are going to focus on the SBIR route that he has taken. And with that, I'm just going to stop sharing my screen, and Emil and I will have a little chat. But first, Emil will introduce himself. Go for it, Emil, as I'm trying to find out how to stop share. There we go.
Thanks, Anita. I see a few people here that I know, some who I haven't seen in a long while, like Sonia and Dre and a few others, and a whole bunch of new names and faces. So welcome. I don't want to be too long-winded, but my origin story starts far from here in the Great White North of Canada, and I moved to Tucson in 2017 in January. because literally it was 37 below 0 Celsius, and it was January 15th. And I thought to myself, why am I doing this? And I got in my car and I moved to Tucson. I'm a dual citizen. So the reason that's important to you maybe today is I didn't know anything about economic development. I didn't know anything about SBIR. I didn't know anything about any of the details of the tools and the systems and the organizations that are in place to help startup companies in the United States generally and Tucson specifically. So that story that I'm going to tell here today, I think might have a lot of good information for you if you feel like you really don't know where to start. And if you do know where to start, maybe some of the bruises and successes that we've had along the way might be helpful on you there. So what did we do in 2017? My business partner and I, his name's Tommy, we came up with an idea based off of a technology called RFID, which is radio frequency identification. Now, if you've never heard of that, you've probably used it. If you've ever tapped to pay with a credit card, or if you have a passport, it has a little RFID chip in it. And what that lets it do is communicate wirelessly with a reader. You know, so if you tap your credit card or your iPhone, for that matter, to a terminal at a gas station, that's using RFID to do it. If you use your passport at a gas station, that's using RFID to do it. And what we figured out was we could use the underlying technology of RFID to create smart packaging that allows us to create an envelope, a shoebox, really any object, and encase it in the smart layer, and then using RFID, get that information to someone who needs to use it. The long story short is using Signet technology on a piece of product packaging allows any person in the world with a smartphone, so any Android or any modern Android, any iPhone, and you just simply tap it to the packaging enabled with our technology, and we tell you two things. We tell you, did this object originate from where you think it does? And two, has it ever been tampered with? Has anyone ever opened it or stuck a syringe or a knife through it, anything like that? So that was the technology that we had. We had this idea of how the technology would work, but we didn't know how to build it. We didn't know if it would work, and we needed resources to help us test those things. And that's where we became familiar with the SBIR program. I guess that's what I'll stop with now, Anita. But where do you want me to go next?
All right, maybe Emil, you wanna tell us, you know, what agency did you approach, and how did you even think of which agency or should you approach? Like, how did you get started?
Yeah, it was a pretty rocky start, a pretty stressful start. I laugh when I think about this story. So as I had said, I was new to town, and we'd connected with Startup Tucson a lot. We've connected with Eric and Anita at UACI. We've connected with the Chamber of Commerce. They were also really great to us, and then some individuals within the ecosystem, and one of them's here today, which is Sonia. And I remember having our first little get together at the barrio there, and Sonia laid out, here's all the different grant opportunities and stuff that you might want to look into, and one of them was the SBIR program. And so that was the first I'd ever heard of it. Never heard about it before. Well, a few months later, we were doing some pretty in-depth looking for grant opportunities for us. And my business partner, Tommy, found that the National Science Foundation had a posting for an opportunity for us. But the thing is, we had, what was it, Sonia? It's like 4 days between when we found out about it.
I think we started on Thursday and delivered it like on Monday.
On Monday, yeah, something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah, so the National Science Foundation, that was an intimidating thing for me. This is the people that do a lot of incredible things. And so, yeah, we found out about it on Thursday. We called Sonia up and we said, Sonia, is there any way we can get a grant proposal written in 4 days and submitted in 4 days? And she basically said no, but you might as well try. And so we hired her to help us out. We didn't have a lot of resources, so she was very kind to us, and basically gave us some good advice and some really rough, some templates. Not that the templates were rough, but we had to fill everything in. And I don't know that we slept that weekend. And we wrote our phase 1 grant proposal for the National Science Foundation. It was for about $250,000. And here's the real kicker. Because we were on such short notice, we hadn't done some of the, or we hadn't completed some of the sort of background stuff you have to do. So there's this website called sam.gov. It's the System for Awards Management. And if you want to do business with the federal government in any way related to SBIR or any other grant, you have to be in that database. And it takes a bit of time for that to happen. And once it's in sam.gov, it takes some time for that data to transfer over to the National Science Foundation. And so we finished writing our application probably on the Sunday. We'd gone through a few edits and drafts with Sonia. And Monday morning, you know, it's due at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And Monday morning, our data was in sam.gov, but it hadn't transferred to the National Science Foundation. And so we had notified on the Friday, we'd notified the program director about this potential problem. But you know, it was still the rule. The rules are the rules. So we went through all the documentation from the NSF, and we wrote down a very detailed plan, kind of like a pilot's checklist of, okay, the moment we're able to build our application in their system, here's exactly the steps we're going to do and how we're going to move everything in. So it's due at 5 o'clock. And I think it finally came through, and we were finally able to start preparing the application at about 4:21 p.m. So we had less than an hour, and we got it all through. And at 4:58 p.m., we hit submit, and the web server failed, and we just get Java server error on the page. It was the most stressful and disappointing thing ever. But the reason I'm telling you this story is we had a relationship with our program director. I don't think he thought too much of us at that time, because here's a bunch of weirdos from Tucson saying, hey, we're going to apply, and we're, you know, doing it in less than a week. But he was very gracious and knew that we were having this challenge, and knew that we were trying to follow the rules and do everything that they needed us to do. So they gave us an extra day of grace period to actually submit the application. And then from there, it was a waiting time, right? It was, well, we put it in, and hundreds or thousands of other companies have put in these applications. And I remember thinking to myself, like, this is the National Science Foundation. Like, this is like, remember, I come from Canada, right? Like, there's like 40 million of us on a good day, and we just don't have the I mean, there's great schools and great companies up in Canada, but you know, the United States is just so much more advanced in terms of like some of the universities and some of these ideas coming out of these schools, and as well as that larger granting infrastructure that the United States has. And so we thought, man, you know, we did our best. We think we have a really great idea. We really think we're the people to pull this off, but we'll see what happens. Well, a few months later, we got notification from the NSF saying, hey, we kind of like your proposal, but there's problems with it. Why don't you try and fix these few things? And so we did that, and we went through, and sure enough, they said, yeah, we think that this country needs this technology. We think the world needs this technology, and we think you guys are the guys to do it. And so we received our phase 1 grant funding. That was a pretty good day.
Wow, that's an intense story, and I don't know if I've heard that one, but so thank you for sharing, Emil. So I want to take this opportunity to quickly also introduce Sonia Vonaut. She's chatted a bit and she waved. So Sonia, if you want to wave again. She is a person that helps companies, startups with SBIRs, STTRs, and other grant fundings. And she's actually on our team for UACI now. She's a contractor that's available to our companies that are in our program. So having said that, another thing, if you have any questions, please feel free to use the chat function. Casey will track all the questions and we will answer them when we can get to them. So please feel free. This is supposed to be interactive, even though Emil and I are chatting. So Emil and Sonia, you both said this was nuts. Don't do that. You didn't sleep. How long?
And don't do that. What I just told you, do not.
Don't.
Yeah, don't do that. Disclaimer: I don't advise that.
Yeah, don't.
What is
do
that?
that
Don't repeat what he did.
So, and because people
and
usually remember what you should do, even if you put the no in front, you know, they remember over the weekend. So let's tell them how long does it typically take, and how should it be done to, maybe when you did your phase 2, you learned. Can you talk a little bit about that? You know, either how it should be or how you wrote your phase 2, Emil?
Yeah, so you know, that's a really good point, Anita. I'll say this. So there's a few reasons we were able to do that, right? Like, all odds against us, that we had done a few things previously that made it possible. One is we had built a pretty substantial business plan. So we knew what our market was. We knew what the challenges in the market were. We knew what the finances might look like in terms of, you know, what we needed in terms of resources to make it happen, as well as what we expected to be able to make someday. We built relationships with people like Sonia that could help us. And we'd reached out to the program director at the National Science Foundation. So we weren't just some random document coming through his system, right? I think the moral of our story, first of all, is be smarter than us. But the second one is do the work ahead of time, right? So even if, you know, let's say there's an SBIR application window coming up sometime this fall that your company might be looking at. And you go, you know, we just don't have the time, we don't have the resources, we're not ready for this, whatever it is that you decide not to do it. I'd really encourage you to kind of go through the exercise anyway and compile that information and really think through it. The process itself is almost as valuable as the money, and you know, because it forces you to check all your assumptions. It forces you to I see people talking about teams. It forces you to build a team. It forces so many things to happen. So that's what you should take away from our story, not procrastinate and, you know, hope it works out, because it probably won't.
So Emil, so going back to what I noticed, so sometimes people really want to know very practical. Can you put a number of hours around how long it took you, or maybe even in days or weeks or months, for the phase 2 writing?
Yeah, so the background work that I was talking about was, you know, maybe about 6 months of work, and that was just Tommy and myself at that point. We started around the time that we applied for this grant, we started growing our team. So, you know, we did everything we could to get out to Startup Tucson events and chamber events. And we met a whole lot of people. A whole lot of people thought we were crazy or you know, or whatever. But, you know, some people thought that what we had going was kind of interesting, and they liked our tech, they liked us. And by being out there and being willing to talk and share as much as possible, I think that gives you the opportunity to attract the people that you need. So yeah, so about 6 months of pre-work there. For the phase 2 application, it was a much easier time, partially because we'd done it before, sort of. Now the phase 2 application is different in some ways than the phase 1 application, at least at the NSF. But the broad strokes are fundamentally the same. And so we knew how to write the grant generally. We also knew what worked for us, not in the application process, but the actual performing the grant, right? So when you get the money for phase 1, what you're saying is, hey, in this next 6 months, we're going to use this money in this specific way to do these specific things. And so we knew what kind of things worked for us and kind of things didn't work for us. And so it made that phase 2 writing a whole lot better and a whole lot easier. And the other key part there that I really must mention is, at that time, you know, we'd grown our team. And so we had people that we could say, hey, if we wanted to maybe do this in the future, how would you do it? And our engineer would say, well, this is how we do it. Or, you know, by having the team and doing the work, again, it made it a whole lot easier. I'd say the phase 2 grant, Tommy probably spent 2 or 3 weeks on the commercialization side of the application, though there was a lot of work ahead of time there. And I probably put in a similar amount on the overall, the design of the actual work that we were going to do and how we were going to do it. And you know, we're talking entrepreneur weeks, right? So long days.
All right, 80-hour weeks, got it. So that's a lot of stuff and things and people and processes. Did you use any kind of a project management tool or system? Can you talk a little bit about that, how you keep your stuff in order and straight and moving along?
So we don't use any kind of like monolithic, like we don't have everything in a Gantt chart and follow it. Part of that is, in my experience, and in the kind of technology I work on, you plan and you plan and you plan, and then everything changes, right? You think that going down route A will get you to a solution, and part of the way down route A, you figure out there's actually another route that might be more efficient, more effective. And so we found that trying to over plan isn't helpful. But we do try to over prepare. We try to set ourselves up for success if we need to make changes later on down the line. Now we do use task management software. We do use. I'm a software engineer by training, so we kind of borrow some of the methodologies from that world in how we work. But no, we don't follow I should say we don't strictly follow any particular project management paradigm.
Okay. So I want to go back to something that you disclosed, that you came down from Canada, and good choice, by the way, like minus 37 Celsius. I can't even, like, what? That's like, way below freezing. But it's the US federally funded program, SBIR STTR. So can you talk a little bit about, what are some of the requirements and how did you manage that in your case? If you want to talk about it, or if you want to gloss over that, that's fine too.
Yeah, so Sonia will know more about what I'm about to talk about. So feel free to cut me off and tell me I'm wrong, Sonia. Like, please do, if I'm not quite accurate. So the SBIR program, there's maybe a little under a dozen participating agencies. So it's this law that exists and is administered through the Small Business Administration. They're the ones that sort of make sure the law is being followed, but then the National Science Foundation, the Department of the Navy, Department of Agriculture, et cetera, they all put up solicitations saying, hey, we think that there should be a company or two that can solve this sort of problem or can take this kind of technology to the next level. And periodically throughout the year, 2 or 3 times a year, you can apply for one of these specific solicitations. So that matters, right? If you're working on, I don't know, maybe amazing like satellite dish forming technology, maybe the Department of Agriculture isn't the people you need to be in touch with, maybe, but more likely it's going to be one of the Department of Defense agencies, the National Science Foundation, or one of these others. So you definitely want to find the organizations that are going to be most in line with the kind of technology that you have and that you need. And then there's a whole lot of really specific rules you have to follow in order to apply for these things, and then actually do these things. And for most of us, for me, that means getting people to help me, right? So like one big example of that is the financial management side of things. There's very strict rules, not difficult rules, but very strict rules on how money needs to be accounted for. And you need to follow those, or you're going to find yourself in a whole lot of trouble. So all kinds of those sorts of requirements. But I will also say that the NSF specifically, and I can't speak to the other agencies, they weren't what I expected. And what I mean by that is it's this big government agency. I kind of expected them to be very black and white, very, very rigid in what they wanted from us when they wanted it from us. And every time we went to them and said, hey, we want to change this thing, or we want to do this thing a little bit differently, they just said, well, as long as you justify it to us and you explain yourself on why you want to make a change, cool. And so they've just been incredibly flexible and incredibly, I always thought highly of the NSF from a respect point of view, but my opinion of them has only increased these last several years.
Excellent. And that's a good point, Emil. I do want to talk briefly about that. So there are, if you're somewhat familiar with SBIR STTR, I believe there's 11 different agencies NSF, Department of Defense, and National Institutes of Health are the biggest ones. So they have lots of money that they give out. But the difference is Department of Defense is a contracting agency. So they usually have an end goal in mind, and you're providing a solution, versus it's actually the Department of Human and Health Services, DHHS, but we all call it NIH. They're just kind of like, let's everybody be healthy and safe and cured of, all sorts of diseases. So you tell us how you want to do that. And they have sub-agencies, and the NSF is even more loose. They're just like, you do cool stuff and you get it into the market, and we want to fund that. So there's different agencies have different leniencies just because of their mission. So NSF is, I'm not surprised you say that, because they're just like, yeah, we want you to invent cool stuff, be innovative, and really bring it out into the commercial world and people use it. So if you think as the innovator there's a better way, then they're like, yeah, sure, that's cool. If it was the Department of Defense, they may be a little bit more, yeah, no, we really wanted this to fit on the head, and now it's for the foot, so that's not really what we wanted. So Casey, I know there's a lot of audience questions. Can you maybe pop up one or two for Emil?
Yes. So we have a couple that are directed around phase 2, Emil. So was the phase 2 proposal submission just as dramatic as the phase 1?
No, not dramatic in the slightest. We very much learned our lesson that first time.
Awesome. And then a follow-up to that is, can you speak a little bit to the phase 2 financial audit process?
Yeah, there wasn't one. So here's what I mean by that. When you finish your phase 1 project, you present a final report to your agency. And in that report, it includes all your experimental outcomes. It includes a bunch of stuff about, how you've moved through the market and customers, investors, that sort of a thing, financial reports, etc. Now, I'm not speaking for the NSF or the federal government or anybody when I say this. My impression of things is, if it's very clear that you've dotted your I's and crossed your T's, and you behave professionally, and everything is done to the way they told you in writing it should be done ahead of time, they tend to be, you tend to have earned their trust. So we didn't have any kind of an auditing process there, but it could happen someday. And one of the things that we made the conscious choice to do very early on was, if the NSF or whomever shows up at our door on a Monday, we could have the audit done by Tuesday. We just have everything ready all the time. At the end of the day, this is federal grant money, which means this is your money. And we're stewards of that, right? So we take that very, very seriously.
Fantastic. Did you have another one, Casey, about?
Yes, we'll ask one more and then we'll switch it back to you, Anita. Can you, Emil, talk a little bit about your team for phase 1 and how did you find your team members? Team building is a really big aspect to all of this.
Yeah, many of you will have networks of people that you know that maybe you've worked with or have relationships with in town, and we didn't really have, I didn't have that, right? Except for the very short period of time where we're meeting people like Sonia and Eric and Anita, etc. So we just literally went everywhere that would have us, and just went up to random people and said hi, and started talking to people and saying, hey, we're working on this company. It's called Signet. Here's what we're doing. Here's why we're doing it. I mean, literally hundreds and hundreds of people. By doing that, that led to venues like maybe this one, where either myself or one of the other members of the team, as it grew, could speak to larger groups at a time. Quite often after especially a larger presentation, we'd have a few people come up to us and say, what do you need? You know, so like an example of that was our CFO, Tony Grega. He's also Canadian, so he's got that going for him. But you know, we didn't know each other, and he heard us speak at a Startup Tucson event, and basically wouldn't stop asking me to go out for a drink and talk. We didn't think we needed an accountant at that time. We didn't think we needed a financial guy at that time. But he was just like, no, I want to know more about this. I want to get to know you more. And so we went out for beer and chatted, and it was a really good fit. And so Tony joined the team. Similar things happened with a whole bunch of folks, engineers, designers, marketing people, et cetera, just get out there, talk, share the story of what you're trying to do and why you're trying to do it to as many people who will listen. Even if they won't listen, try and tell them, and you will find a team. And if you don't, maybe question some of your own assumptions.
So that's interesting, because you know, even aside from SBIR, we always the teaming, right, is hard as a startup. So I'm wondering now, is it because you're Canadian and you're just friendly and talk to a lot of people, or is it you know, also a little bit of the technology? What do you think, Emil? What you got going for you?
I don't know. So you can have the best idea in the world, but if you're not going to work well with others, you're probably not going to succeed on bringing that to market. You can have a pretty mediocre idea, but if you're really great at working with people, you might be very successful. I really believe, I've always believed that no one person can really succeed at much. I mean, yeah, there's the Steve Jobs, the Elon Musks, the whatever of the world, but like none of us are that. I just statistically, I don't know most of you, right? But like statistically speaking, we're not 1 in a billions, right? And we can't count on that. So I don't know what it is, Anita. I think being just being vulnerable by like being out there attracts people.
Actually, I wanted to ask that too, you know, because a lot of folks, when they're highly technical or they have this idea that they think, oh my gosh, it's, you know, revolutionary. They don't want to talk about it because they think, you know, somebody else is going to just come along and steal it. Did you ever feel that was the case, or did you say, you know, without people, it's nothing anyway? So we'll talk a little bit about that, how you manage that, you know, saying too much versus not enough.
So, you know, we came up with our technology is, you know, it's highly technical. It's very difficult. But it's pretty interesting. It can solve a lot of really interesting problems, really important problems. And we work on it like every day, every minute. You know, we've been doing it for years, and you know, we're still not, you know, what I would call successful. I know today's talk is sipping on success, right? But it's just hitting that next milestone, right? I don't know what success actually looks like in the end, but we haven't got there yet. And so we're doing, like, every ounce of our energy goes into it, and we, you know, we're not a multi-billion-dollar company or anything, right? So if with all of that effort and the team and all of these things and the intellectual protection or intellectual property protection, if we have all of those things, ask yourself, like, what's the chance, if you just like tell someone about what you're working on, like even in detail, what are the chances that they're going to be able to take your thing and succeed at it, right? Like, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense if you really think it through. So I'm a big believer that technology or business ideas shouldn't keep most of it secret. I don't think you should be worried about people stealing your ideas. I think if people have the gumption to steal your ideas, they're going to have the gumption to come up with their own great ideas. I think it basically gives you an excuse to not go out there and not tell your story, and you should avoid doing that.
All right, I like that. I like that attitude for sure. So let's get back to a little bit more the mundane and the, you know, trite of actually doing this. I know letters of support are often useful and asked for and really help you along. Did you have any for your phase 2 or for phase 2? How did you get them? How many did you have? Can you talk about?
We had our phase one, I think we had 3 or 4. So one was from a private equity group that, by the way, never ended up investing in us. We still have a really good relationship with them, but we just weren't the right fit in the end. But by having that relationship and saying, "Hey, would you write us, a letter of support?" They did. And a few other companies that we thought might be good customers for us, built some relationships with some of their executives and said, "Hey, would you write this letter of support for us?" And they said, "Yeah." And then we had a similar number for our phase 2 application, but at that point they were from organizations, so a venture capital firm and some prospective customers that we have a much more significant relationship with now, or did at the time as well. So I do think they're very important, and I think you need them for your phase 1, and you need them even more for your phase 2.
Okay, fantastic. So it's interesting because, I sometimes write letters of support also, just saying that you would have a place. Getting a letter of support from an investor seems quite interesting. Obviously, they wouldn't buy your technology. So can you, maybe, if it's not too deep, describe what kind of letter that that they wrote for you? What did it entail? And why did the NSF care?
So if it's okay with you, Anita, I'll answer this question in a bit of a roundabout way by telling a story about our experience specifically with the NSF. So I think it's still very similar for phase 1, the application process and whatnot, but I think some details have changed. So make sure you look into what the details look like today. But shortly after we received our phase 1 grant award, we participated in a program called the NSF Boot Camp, which is kind of like the I-Corps program. The NSF, but smaller. So thank you, Sonia. The NSF is very cognizant of the fact that they get really smart people with really cool technology ideas. And most of those, I don't actually know that. Many of those don't succeed commercially because they don't find the relationship with the market that they need to find. So at the end of that boot camp, all of us went to Arlington, Virginia, just across the river from Washington, D.C., and we met at this big hotel. And it was a really weird experience. I'm guessing most of you here are used to being one of the smartest people in a room. Not trying to be arrogant, but that's the thing that I'm kind of used to. Like, I'm a smart guy, right? I'm not the smartest guy, but I'm a smart guy. And so being at that conference with the National Science Foundation was an extraordinarily humbling experience, realizing that I've never been in a room with an average IQ this high before. And these are incredibly clever, incredibly hardworking people. But when we split into our smaller groups of about 30 and we gave presentations on what we learned in that boot camp, many of these folks clearly were too in love with their tech. I remember one guy in particular, he had a piece of sensing equipment for testing, non-destructively testing metal, like a bridge, let's say, see if there's any cracks in it. And he'd actually been in the business for a few decades, and he'd originally invented this device that could do this scan. And now he had invented a new way of making it better. And it was going to, it's faster and it's more accurate and all these things. And this is what he was working on for his phase 1 grant. And in the boot camp process, he interviewed his customers, and I mean, he's in front of the room telling us this, right? He says, I interviewed my customers and every one of them said the old version works fine and they really don't need the new version. But they're wrong and they'll buy the new version. And I remember looking over at the program director who's listening to this, and the look on his face of just like, he was just exhausted by this, right? And so this is just a way of saying it's really, really important that as technology people, if you're a technology person, that you either find someone to join your team that can help you understand why someone will buy your product, why they will use your product, what actual problems you're solving, or figure out how to do that in your own head where you're not too in love with what you're working on itself. So the reason I answered in that way to your question is the NSF hears from a lot of really smart engineers and scientists all the time. What they don't hear enough from is from the actual market. And so an investor writes them a letter saying, hey, we really think that these guys are onto something, and we really think that customers will actually want to buy this thing. That means a whole lot to the folks that run these programs, a whole lot.
Emil, I'm gonna just take this clip you just said and we'll make its own individual video and blast it out to the world. Thank you. And that was not prompted, but also want to say I've never felt like the smartest person in the room. That is why I work with entrepreneurs. So I like being the dumbest in the room, and it's been humbling to me forever. But yes, so I really appreciate smartness. And we're all about this customer discovery process. And again, with NSF is even more important because NSF will never buy your widget, gadget, whatever you're coming up with. Department of Defense may, Department of Energy may, Department of Education may, but again, there's this difference in those entities. So we do have another question about technology readiness level. What technology readiness level do you think your product was prior to considering the submission? And I assume that would be the phase 1 getting started on this.
Yeah. We knew that we knew that it in terms of like in terms of the realities of physics and mathematics and computation, we knew that our technology would work. What we didn't know was how to build it in a few ways. So our tech relies on a microprocessor that does some things, as well as on this smart layer that I talked about. And we had ideas on how to build these things. We had built sort of breadboarded versions. That's like chips on a. I have some over there, but to prove that
I don't know what a breadboard is now. So
the circuits work. It's a way you can plug wires and chips in and validate a design before you either start miniaturizing it or putting it on a printed circuit board or whatever. So we knew that it could. We knew that it would work. We didn't know how to build it in the way that it would work the best way possible. And they were okay with that. They were okay with that. I think part of that was because Sonia helped us hone our language very carefully to describe exactly the underlying operating principles of the technology. There was no black box. There was no well, we'll do these things here and we'll do these things here and then it'll work together. That didn't exist in our proposal. We knew what we needed to solve.
Mm-hmm. I think that at the end of the phase 1, you probably were at breadboard level, and you. No,
we were way past breadboard by the end of the phase 1.
Okay.
We had the whole tech built on a thing about the size.
You
of
had you had it on a label, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So at what point did you have it implemented in a relevant environment? Are you doing that now?
We're still working on that, Sonia.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're probably between, to answer Jack's question, you were probably somewhere between 3 and 4 at the end of your phase 1, where you had a prototype built, but it still had to go into the relevant environment.
Yeah, and so this comes into some of the the business needs, the market needs that we were talking about. At the end of phase 1, we had actually built, like physically built, and had it set up the ability to build many of these, like millions of these things, for a specific market opportunity. But it wasn't an ideal market opportunity for us. And so we decided not to go forward with it. But by doing that technical work and doing the market work, we learned so much about so many things that that we're now benefiting from on refining the parts of the technology to get it to where we need it to be for other commercialization opportunities.
All right. And then just a quick follow-up, and I'll see there's some audience questions. And I assume then, based on your background and maybe some other background team members, is what convinced the NSF that you're the team that actually can figure it out if they give you the money. Is that a correct assumption?
So yeah, so our program director, Richard was his name. He's no longer with the NSF. He's gone on to other great things. We had a one-on-one meeting with him, that same meeting in Arlington I was talking about. And I actually asked him this question. I said, Richard, I mean, like we're talking like postdocs from MIT and like incredibly smart people that we were competing against. And like, I'm just like some middling software engineer that has never done a government contract, and there's lots of things that I don't know. And Tommy, my business partner, he's not a nerd, don't get me wrong, but he's not a coder, he's not an engineer. And I remember, it's just very distinct memory sitting around this round table at that hotel, and I said, why did you say yes to us? Because we felt, like we were in a bit of a different league than the other people. And what he said was, it was a few things. One was the fact that we quit our jobs and dove in on this thing. Like, we believed in it 100% and it proved it to them. That was one of them. The other thing was that that we clearly understood, as big of nerds as we were, we understood that it was the market that really mattered. Mm-hmm. And then he said, and as for like any of the other weaknesses, he said, you seem like the kind of people that would figure that out.
Okay. Excellent. There was another question about the pitch, and I'll answer that one quickly. So the NSF and all the other agencies, as a matter, are changing their approaches and rules quite frequently. I don't want to say all the time, but quite frequently. So yes, for the NSF now, you have to do a project pitch first, and then you get invited to submit a phase one. I believe, Emil, that was not the case when you applied, correct?
Right. We were the last cohort, and then I think NSF calls it a phase 0. Is that right, Sonia? Or they did at the time?
No. It's just the DOE has it. So it's a project pitch that you now have to submit, and they pretty much have a continuous accept them. So as soon as one is ended, they open another one. So you don't run into this, well, there's a deadline, but it's not as critical as what Emil had experienced to get it in over the weekend. But that's only NSF. So other agencies still have a very strict deadline, like NIH has 3 times a year and things like that. So that again, once you figure out where you want to apply, make sure you understand all the rules. You can connect with us or Sonia to really help you sort that out. So then one very practical question also is, how much time between the end of phase 1 and phase 2? And I've noticed that people sometimes don't realize there's a gap of funding, so it's not seamless. How did that work out for you guys? I think there was a bit of a gap. Yeah,
so again, please correct me if I'm wrong. So my impression of things is the program is actually designed to have a gap. I think it's on purpose. I think they want you to prove to them that you can stand on your own 2 feet without, only relying on them for resources. And so there's this, 6, 9, 12-month period. And it actually depends. So at least for us at that time in the NSF, you had 3 dates set in stone on when you could apply for your phase 2. So our our phase one started around the new year. And the first application point was August, and then the next one was December, and then the next one was the following August. And you had to make one of those three, or you couldn't apply for phase two. And so as we were told, everyone says that they're going to apply for that first opportunity, right? But right, so now we started in say January. By August, you're done. You're done your phase one. And so if you hit that first deadline, you're now applying, and it's going to be about, if you're successful, it's going to be about 6 months. Well, I believe at that time, it was only about 10% of phase one companies were actually hitting that first deadline for their application. So most companies have a longer gap than we experienced. We had a funding gap of 6-7 months. But during the phase one, we were able to raise about $1 million in venture capital. And I think that drastically helped our prospects on the phase two application, though I don't know that for sure.
Yeah, if I may just make a comment for everybody on this call, especially if you're an academic or researcher focused person that kind of views the company as a side gig. You heard Emil say, they went all full in, which of course looks fantastic. And also SBIR is funding no matter what agency for commercialization. So they do want products going into the market at the end of it. So they do look favorably upon companies that have other funding, really building a business plan around this as well. So I think you're absolutely right on that, Emil, that helped you. I see a lot of questions. We are coming up towards the end of this session. We will have more of those, as I mentioned. Look in the we have now all your emails, so we will send not too much, but we will keep you in the loop for our next sessions. The plan is to have different entrepreneurs, all from Arizona though. So we want to highlight Arizona can get those grants and contracts. So once a month, we'll have a fireside chat. So come with your questions and whatnot. Let's just see if there's anything. Phase 2B, yes. Emil, did you take advantage of the phase 2B? I would imagine so.
Yeah, so it's a little more so there's the numbers have probably changed slightly, but when we applied for phase two, the maximum you could apply to was 750,000, and we came in just under that. And then there's about $650,000 in additional funding opportunities that come along there. The one that Rosalind's asking about is like a fund matching thing against investor funds. So yes, we are intending to take advantage of that, though we have not actually requested the funds at this time.
Yep. So again, there's a little time that you have. So there's all sorts of things. So we just covered just a little fraction. Wanted to highlight the journey of one entrepreneur amongst ourselves in our midst here in Arizona, who's managed to go through this process. And it wasn't just an entrepreneur, it's a team. So we do want to highlight SBIRs are only for-profit companies. They have to be innovative. They have to be technology, cannot be, a food truck or something like that. There's so much to learn. As I mentioned, we've done outreach for 10, 15 years or so. I'm always learning something new. It's just such a big program. It's billions of dollars, but millions of that are coming to Tucson of that. And we want to make that accessible to y'all. I'm going to share my screen one more time real briefly. And thank you, Emil, so much for chatting with us today. It's been such a pleasure. And I think it's also the Canadian in you. You're just a nice guy, right?
Well, thank you for having me. So I can't promise I'll get back to you on a reasonable time schedule, but my email address is emil@sgnt.io. Email me, ask me questions. My answer will probably be go talk to Dre at Startup Tucson, go talk to Anita or Eric at UACI. That's probably going to be the advice I'm going to give you. But I also think that we really are in this together as a community, as Southern Arizona, as a state, and we're always willing to help folks out. So get in touch if you need something.
And thank you, Emil. So we'll do that. You have our email too. And of course, now my computer decided that it doesn't want to share the screen anymore. So what I wanted to highlight is, and maybe I'll type it, or Casey, you can type because I cannot talk and type at the same time, SBIR.gov. So that's SBIR.gov. That is the website, all SBIR, STTR related. We didn't talk about STTR because that's not what Emil had. We'll do that at another month. So if you're interested, if you don't know, if you have any questions, that's a great resource to go to. There is a monthly call that